Hi guys! Today I'm going to show you how to do Chicago deep dish pizza. So come on in and welcome to Kay's Little Kitchen. Hi guys! I'm really excited about this recipe. I am going to show you guys how to make Chicago pizza. And not just deep dish pizza, but if you have ever been to Giordano's or Lou Malnati's in Chicago, where they have the double stacked crust, thick ooey gooey cheese with toppings in it, and a whole mess of marinara on top, then you are missing out, but you can make it at home. So let's get started. First, we're going to make our crust. And this pizza crust is just a generic pizza crust. You don't have to do this and make a Chicago style pizza. This pizza crust is a nice flat canvas for you to make whatever kind of pizza you love making. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is whip up our crust because it is a yeast bread, a yeast recipe, and so it needs 30 minutes to chill and rise. So to start off with, we are going to put 2.5 cups of flour into a mixing bowl. You don't have to use a stand mixer for this recipe. You can easily whip this by hand with a bowl and a spoon or a spatula, whatever you've got, okay? I'm personally going to start with 2 cups of whole wheat flour. You don't have to use whole wheat flour. You can use whole wheat flour. Whatever you would like to do, whatever floats your boat is what you're going to do here. Okay? All right, so 2.5 cups of flour. And then we are going to do what amounts to 2 packages of yeast, 2 of those 1-ounce little packages you get at the store. I buy my yeast in a brick because I use it so often for so many things. Okay, and so when you buy your yeast in bulk, 1 package of yeast ends up being 2.25 teaspoons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a slightly mounded teaspoon to make up 2 makes 1 pouch. 4 makes 2 pouches. Now you may be thinking that's an awful lot of dough I'm going to be making, and it is true. But for Chicago pizza, you need to make enough for 2 layers of crust in your pan. If you are doing this just for yourself, you could make half this recipe. The recipe will be on my website. You could make half this recipe for yourself for pizza night, or go ahead and make this double portion. Cut your dough in 4s and saran wrap and freeze the 3 portions that you may not use tonight, okay? But again, this is a recipe, this is a crust portion for Chicago pizza, and we need the extras. Okay, so now that we've got those things in, okay, I'm going to put a little bit, maybe a tablespoon of sugar in, and that's just for my preference, for my people. That is not necessary. You do need to toss in a little bit of salt. Okay, now we're going to put our paddle on, or you'll use a whisk or a fork at home, and you're going to mix those together. Okay, once we've got those things kind of whisked and mixed together, we are going to put our stand mixer on low, or we're just going to do this next step and then work it really hard with a wooden spoon or a whisk. Okay, I have 2 cups of warm water, and I have my olive oil. I know that this all goes in, so my mind is going to be focused more on drizzling in just a little bit of olive oil. We're going to pour this in slowly so as not to make a mess. Just a little bit of olive oil goes in, but then all of my warm water. You'll see as it's mixing here, now that everything has incorporated, I'm going to bring it up to really whip this part together completely. If you're doing this by hand, you really need to make sure that that yeast, salt, and sugar gets all mixed into this sponge part of the dough, okay? And once we have a nice cohesive sponge that we've worked, that we don't see a whole lot of lumps left, then the next step is for us to go ahead and, for a stand mixer, we're going to use the dough hook. And if you're doing this by hand, just grab your wooden spoon that you've had before. And we're going to make the magic with that. With our stand mixer on low, we're going to add 1 cup of flour at a time with our dough hook, okay, into our mixing bowl. And as you can see, it is working that dough in. We don't want this to go too high or we'd be spitting flour all over the kitchen. And trust me, I've done that before. You probably won't have to do this with your bowl and your wooden spoon because you can control it better. But what I'm doing is I am going to use the dough hook and kind of scrape along the sides where the flour was sitting up above where the dough was mixing together. And now that those pieces, that cup of flour has worked in nicely, I'm going to slowly add 1 more cup. Okay, so about half of that 3rd cup has gone in. You can see how the flour sticks to the side. That's okay. The moist dough is going to grab a hold of that. I'm going to just bump it up 1. So this comes together, and while the flour is being incorporated, bringing that all together, what we're looking for is a nice smooth ball of dough that's not stiff, but it is not tacky or moist at all. Okay, from the looks of this, I am going to slowly add a little bit more of that 3rd cup of flour. And if you are using whole wheat flour, you will notice that whole wheat flour will suck up more moisture than white all-purpose flour or your bread flours. And so that's why I tend to, if I'm using whole wheat flour at all, I tend to hold back a little on my flour usage just so that I can make sure that my dough is not super hard, that it still has some pliability to it. See how nicely that's coming together? All right, so I just touched it. It's still a little bit tacky. And so we're going to start incorporating that last ½ cup. So a total of 4½ cups goes into this recipe. But depending on what type of flour you're using, you need to keep an eye on your dough to make sure that you're not adding too much flour to dry it out. If you're using a bowl and a wooden spoon, once you have all the flour incorporated, you're going to put this on the counter and knead it. Basically rolling the dough over and then pushing the heel of your hand through the dough. And that's just strengthening gluten and creating a beautiful, stretchy, pliable crust. Okay, once you have a nice, soft, strong ball of dough, you are going to place some oil at the bottom of your bowl, whether the stand mixer bowl or if you're doing this by hand. You will then roll your dough and kind of make a tight ball by rolling it and pinching it one direction. Then you will roll the top tight side of your dough ball in the oil and place it seam side down, oiled ball top up, for 30 minutes while it rises. Right, now we are ready to start rolling out our dough. We're going to flour our surface really well. Bring the entire dough ball out of the bowl. And then we are going to, not 2/3 and 1/3, but we are going to basically split our dough to like a 60-40 type of split. Not exactly half. Okay, that side's going to rest over there. We're going to make sure that we are well floured And we are going to roll this out into our circle. And you'll need to probably add more flour as you are rolling this. You're going to want this, if you're making a pizza crust just for yourself, just for a pizza, then roll this to as thin as you would prefer it. For Chicago crust, for this double stuff, this bottom crust, you want it to be not super thin like a quarter inch, but not super thick like a half inch. We want it to be thick enough to sustain all of the heaviness, all the heavy toppings and everything we're about to put in here. So it looks like I'm going to have some nice excess, which is great because that usually means breadsticks. Okay, that is nice and thick. It's the depth that I like it for the bottom crust. I'm sorry, now this is big enough to start putting into our pan. For my family, we use the cast iron skillet, the high-sided cast iron skillet for our Chicago pizza. You could use a springform pan if you want really, really nice defined sides. You could also use a pie pan. Anything that's going to give you enough of a depth to double stack all of the ingredients like I'm about to show you, okay? So inside my cast iron, I'm going to put a nice layer of cornmeal so that my crust does not stick. I'm going to bring this over. You saw I folded it in half and then I just move it over. And now I pick up the sides so that I can make sure that the crust goes all the way down into that corner at the bottom. Okay? So just lift it up and gently place it at the bottom there. There we go. I'm going to leave the excess on for right now. So these are the layers for your Chicago double stacked pizza. The first thing that goes in is your protein, whatever your protein is. For us, this is salami. And I'm just going to spread this around the way you would top a pizza, but it's at the bottom. It doesn't have to be pretty because this layer is just going to get all happily mushed together. Okay? I've covered the bottom with salami, and now I am going to layer my pepperoni. And again, I'm not necessarily totally covering the bottom, but I have carnivores in my family, and so they like a lot of meat. Okay, I've got the meats in, and you'll see that I've just got light ground cover, as they would say. Then comes whatever toppings you happen to like on a pizza. I love veggies on a pizza, so we are doing big old chunks of bell pepper in here. Yum, yum, yum. Sprinkle in our diced onion. I love mushroom. Alrighty, now that we have got our toppings, quote unquote toppings, inside our pizza, we are going to cover this with mozzarella cheese. Spread that around nicely. Okay, make sure again you're going to flour your surface. Get both sides nice and floured. And this is going to roll out to a nice circle, about 1/4 inch thick. This one we want to be maybe a little thinner than our other crust was. Okay, this one's going to need to touch the sides, but it's not supporting nearly the weight of pizza. Okay, beautiful. Now we need to layer our second crust. Just like you do a pie, I folded it in half. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to press my hand down to make sure that there is no gap, that this second crust is all the way down there. Okay. Now I'm going to get some water and I'm going to wet the two crusts together. I'm going to cut along the top horizontally. See how I have the knife at the top there? Okay, get our excess out of the way. Then I'm going to dip my 2 fingers into some water and then press the 2 levels of the crust together. Okay, now that we have our crusts all pressed together, I'm going to make, just like a pie, I'm going to make some steam holes right here. And now on top of our vented second crust that we've pressed together, we are going to put our pizza sauce, our marinara. This is homemade pizza sauce that I had in the freezer. So this pizza sauce already has, or this marinara already has Italian sausage in it, which is going to give just an extra added oomph and delightful taste. I highly recommend, if you guys ever have leftovers that you don't know what to do with, by day 2, at the end of day 2, if you haven't eaten them all, throw them in the freezer so that you can pull them out like this when you need to use them. So on top of your marinara layer, you could thinly slice tomatoes. You could put black olives. But you have now completely made a beautiful double-decker Chicago-style pizza. This goes in a 375 oven for a whole hour. Allow this to cool for 15 minutes before you cut into it, and you'll have beautiful slices where you can see all your layers of ooey gooey goodness.